Welcome back, crew. We've got a special treat for the group. We are doing a new series called Meet the Maker, and we get to kick it off with Kieron Gillen, comic book writer, as well as the creator of the Die RPG, our June game of the month. And today we're going to kind of get to talk about both how he kind of came into writing TTRPGs, his background, and a lot about the Die RPG. So welcome, Kieron, to the channel. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's delighted to be here.
Definitely, I'm happy you joined in. I guess especially glad you got to be the first one for the crew. And that just so a little bit of background on Kieron. We were just talking about it. I came across him as a comic book writer during his run on the X-Men. I'm a huge X-Men fan. If anybody who's watched the channel for a while would know, during Mutants and Masterminds and Champions, set both of those during the X-Men era. And I loved your guys' run with it. You actually you and Fraction made one of the characters I hated or disliked the most on the X-Men animated series into one of my favorite characters, Cyclops. I'm a huge after you Brubaker and Fraction's run, like that Cyclops became one of my favorites, and on the animated show I thought he was just the boring guy, the stick in the mud.
It's like, I tell you what, like I felt that Cyclops arc they told, I felt I was coming in at season 4 of Breaking Bad. You know what I mean? Like all these people have done such great work in taking this guy one step further and further and further. And I took him over when he was like, right, F everybody. You know, and it was really great. He was a great character to write, like, because it's hard. I mean, he's the boring guy, but like there's an interest to that guy, you know? You've just got to like lean into it. And like especially like when I'm writing him now, and he's a lot calmer now, but I'm still writing him as the most his enthusiastic nerd is the way I describe him, because it's like there's this bit. I'm writing Immortal X-Men at the moment, and there's a bit I've basically written his plans for dealing with like enormous monsters that attack. And it's like it's like imagine like running a game with Cyclops. He'll be the guy who's got all the plans for the baddies. Okay, you go first, and I'll cast this, and you know, yeah, that's Cyclops. Bless. Anyway, I love the game.
You'd definitely be the optimizer player at the table.
Yeah. He'll be terrible at Dino. I think about it. It's like.
Yes, I loved that run between Cyclops and then Colossal Knot. That was definitely like or Colossus Knot, the Juggernaut Colossus, I'll say. Those were two of my favorite pieces on that, between that and the Fear itself run. But you wrote that. You also wrote I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I loved your Darth Vader in Dr. Aphra series too. One of the players, Rich, who played in the actual play, wanted to make sure I gave a big shout out for Dr. Aphra. He loves that series. And then you made the Die comic series, which we'll be kind of talking about today. But one of the first questions I had for you is just, especially kind of like being a comic book writer, how did you kind of make the transition into tabletop RPGs?
Like, it might surprise no one, but I'm a big old nerd. Like, my background is like, when I first started like having a real job, well, actually I worked bars for a while, but then I got a job on like video game magazines. But like for me, games is like all just games. Like, it's not like video games are separate from like board games or RPGs. So like my interests have always got wobbled in and out. Like I go through periods where I'm into some stuff more than other stuff. And if you go back even to like when I was like in the noughties, I'm doing my own little board game designs for the fun of it. So like, I've always been fiddling. But like in terms specifically the Die RPG, it was like a lot of the books I do outside of Marvel are about what I'm obsessed by, as in the art I love. So like I go into comics with a book called Phonogram, which is about music. And that, yeah, except, and the fact of somebody who'd actually written about games as long as I did, why have I never done a game comic? So that was in my head, and an idea came up for Die. And then the other side of that was, how can you make it more so? Because I was coming off the back of a book called Wicked Divine. And a friend of mine called Lee Alexander, we was talking about an issue we did in that. And the issue was basically issue 23, I think it is. And it's a magazine issue. And it's done because the artist we wanted to work with didn't do sequentials. So, like, how can we do an artist? It's, you know, Kevin Wadder, who does amazingly beautiful fashion show site designs. He was like, "Where's it? We'll do it like a fashion magazine." So we get all the cool gods in looking awesome, and then I'll write up these articles, interviews with them. Then it's like, wait, no, you know enough journalists. Let's get the journalists to write the articles. Like, we'll hire these really talented culture writers. There's, no, we won't just give them some quotes. Let's get online and role play the interviews, and then they'll take the transcript and write it up like it really happened, and then also make the whole thing look like a magazine. And it's like, it was a fun project, and it was obviously barking. But Lee said to me afterwards, like, I think your work is most interesting when you do what only you could really do in terms of the skills you bring to bear. And part of me was like, "Oh, F off, completely. And then it was like, no, actually, I get it. Like, because that involves, I need to know magazines. I need to know culture writers. I need to be able to role play someone live. Because like back in the 90s, like I used to play on the mushes and stuff, like the online RPG stuff. Like,
Oh yeah.
And that was kind of that in that 1998, the year I learned to write, really, I think, was about me being trapped online, pretending to be like robots or whatever. And so like all these different skills were in this issue. And I was like, right, these got a point. And so I decided after Wicking Divine to really lean into that. And the stupid for no one else I could think of would try to do a bespoke RPG system from scratch alongside the game. And it's also because it's not just the game of the comic, it's also the comic of the game because they've developed at the same time. And they're I always describe them as two ways of looking at the same thing. Like if you play the game and read the comic, you'll sort of see what die is in between it, like a hologram. So that, you know what I mean? What's the extra thing you can do? What's the dumb thing you can do? And design an RPG from scratch.
Well, that was one of the crazy things. So I was reading the kind of the behind the scenes and the comic books, and I just assumed the comic came first, and then you kind of came back afterwards. Like, I can add an RPG to this, but you did both of them at the same time. So how did that what part was it challenging, kind of balancing the story parts and then trying to come back and kind of put mechanics to it at the same time?
It's like the way I describe it is for quite a while I was thinking, what was the tail and what was the dog? I'm not sure what bit was wagging the other. And eventually the dog had its own tail and became an Ouroboros. And eventually it was that kind of, no, they are just the same thing. And I went back and forth between them, the thinking. And one good thing is it made me do a lot more thinking about die from different angles, which meant that, I've got an insight over here, enrich this thing over here. But problems I solved in the game solve problems in the comic and vice versa. Like, and a good example, spoilers for both die, the game and the comic, like the Fallen. Like the Fallen were originally in the comic when I was sort of planning it, and I sort of knew they had a dark secret or something creepy, but I didn't really know what yet. I thought maybe it was something from the Neo, yada yada yada. And I was sort of working on the game and thinking play elimination is boring, and this game's quite deadly, So what? And obviously there's no room to make a new character mid game because Persona Gen is so intense in die. So what can we do? Oh, they just get up. And then you've got that core mechanic in terms of and if they kill someone they can live, and then it's they're fallen. They're the Fallen. And then in other words, and then every Fallen in the comic is somebody who's died in the game, and immediately, oh my god, that's an amazingly creepy, cool idea. Or you know what I mean? So solving the gameplay problem immediately made something incredibly cosmic horror creepy in the comic, and that kind of ness. So yeah, there's no, and it's just ways of thinking. And the other side about die, which is worth mentioning, some of it's just how I did die, or how me and Stephanie how do you do a Kieron Gillen plot? And it's like, Persona, here how you make up messed up people. And then Ritual was like, how you take up these messed up people and throw them into a blender and have emotional catharsis at the other side. That's the other side of it. Anyway, I'm ranting.
No, that was great, and and that's really I would never have guessed that the Fallen piece kind of came from the game mechanics side verse, because that's one of my favorite pieces with that. I was hoping, and nobody, spoilers for our actual play, but nobody died. The master died at the end, but I was hoping somebody would die so they'd get that creepy comeback as a Fallen sensation, because that was just really one of the cool parts of it.
It's fun. Yeah, honestly, it's because no one really likes, death not being a fail state seems really interesting, especially with die when it's almost like a game show at the end. You got these simple rules, like you have to vote to go home and everyone has to agree. And if you had dead people don't get votes, suddenly it's like shit. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to not swear. I'm a naturally sweary British person, so
no worries. I love that kind of because especially because when we went through, because I think only 2 of my players had read the comics before we started going through, and when we got to the rules portion where you have to all decide, you have to either leave or stay, and then kind of put that ominous only the living get the vote. They kind of all got that PvP could really be super likely at the end, and I think that was kind of a cool way to do it. And I think you guys kind of on the TTRPG side gave some really good safety mechanics too, because it's one of those games that I had some of my favorite players and we got through really well, but something it could be PvP for other games could be pretty fraught with emotion, and I think you guys gave some good tools to help balance that out and make sure people knew what was going to happen going in.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one all the way through the development that was very on our mind, because it's upsetting, and so you need to make sure people have bought in. I mean, buy-in is so important in games. Not for me. I think it's full stop. It's important. And then after we'd done all the work we did, then we had Kiana and Lauren come in, who developed the magic circle, which was a development of something was already in the game, but much more so in terms of let's really delineate what we're going to do. And I think it's kind of, if you say at the start, the standard setting is no PvP except possibly in the end game. And that sets up the idea, oh, wait a sec, our emotions may get that intense. And so you're already thinking about your choices and, okay, I get it. Maybe I'll get to the point where I want to do violence against somebody. And that when you know it's coming, you start making choices, you know, and it also makes it safer because you know where it might be. And I tell you, and the fun thing about Die, you know, it is because the rules at the end are so simple, but it's also, I have no idea what's going to happen. Because they're like the persona or the difference things. So who are these people? What do they really want? And that's what Die is about, really. Like, what do they want and what are they willing to do to get it? and my favorite is always like when people help each other and go, and it's always because it's usually a cry for help. Somebody's having a cry for help, and their friends go, "No, we're going to change. We're going to do something better." And that's kind of the heartwarming end of Die, rather than the stabby. But stabby's fun too, you know.
Definitely fun. It's kind of fun putting them through, as you said, that emotional blender. And the cool thing is, like, even with like going through and we did the whole persona generation, like, as the master, I had no idea what they were going to pick to stay or leave. It was fun kind of getting them to see coming together and picking what they wanted to do and how they wanted to end it all. So that was just really one of the fun surprises there, even after figuring out all the craziness and brokenness of all their personalities.
Yeah, it's a lot of. I mean, for me, it's like, obviously I've played it a bunch, but that. One of the things that's unusual about Die, not unique obviously, but unusual, is it does have a set ending. You know, like, and if you have a set, the idea at least for rituals is you have a sort of set start and a set end, and then you've got this ballooning middle. And the middle can be anything, but the way story works in other medium is, as long as you can sort of head roughly towards an ending, everything ends up like narrowing, and the ending just has to be able to be true to everything else. You know, if the ending, and that's kind of, I think that's how Die works, and works as well as it mostly does. So like, yeah. That was like one of the original ideas for Die, like the core voting to go home. You know, so like there's lots. Obviously, it's the first game I've developed, and RLD have done amazing amounts of reworking stuff with me. But like in terms of the core stuff, I think works in the game is the core stuff. You know, that basic. This is what the game is. That's the cool stuff for me. And when people respond to it well, it means a lot. You know, and people get, you know, so the weird thing about this, like, people play the game better than I can because players are so good, you know, and GMs are so good. So seeing people like going with real emotional commitment and going to weird and very dark, deep and human places, it's like, wow, you're inspiring. So like, yeah, it's design a game. I strongly recommend it to people.
On my bucket list, probably closer to the time I get to retire, hopefully. We have to figure out a way to do that. But yeah, that was, and one thing I want to give a major shout out to you on, because this is the first time I've seen this. And actually, I'll ask you this: with the ritual system, was this something you kind of came up with on it like completely, or did you like find it with another system, or how did you come across that process?
When you say rituals, as in terms of like the chapter rituals, the structure for the game.
Exactly, kind of coming in with the process to kind of getting the game going and kind of giving a little bit of background for the middle and then kind of giving that ending too. I thought those are really, because I usually hate running pre-written one shots, and this is a kind of a fun way to still have structure without like feeling like I don't have control of the game, for lack of a better word.
That's an interest. Like, my brain's going blank because I can't say anything specific I'm ripping off. Like, I always use ripping off in a positive way, but there's lots of influences in there. You know, like I'm pausing for a second. I can't think of any one thing I'm lifting from. I'm going to immediately forget it when I'll mail you afterwards if it comes to mind. But like the core sort of thing was that insight. I said, no, if the ending's set and the beginning's set, it will basically work. And and a lot of it was actually from play. This is actually because originally, like, if you go to the early betas, rather than having rituals as it is now, it was a little bit more wishy-washy. Like, you just kind of, there's that techniques and what to build the world out of, and we never even had the set you go to the fantasy world from the background. Like, I played the game a bunch, and every single time I played Die after Persona Gem, like, I had to work out what the world was and how it worked. Like, it was, okay, this one's at a music festival, this one is at someone's old school, this, you know what I mean? Like, I had lots of different methods, but no one, and of course you can't sell that as a game because it's too wide. And it's like, and then I ran a game which actually, the Persona Gem was a bit boring. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that, there's not really a big hook here. And then I was like, what can I do? And it was, no, I know. They can go to the old fantasy game. And that immediately you could do all the stuff that happens in rituals. And then I realized it's like, wait, this works for all games. As long as they've played the game together in the past, this will work. In other words, and that became this is the good default Die scenario. And we've given like a bunch of other ways to sort of different worlds later. And like, I'm writing a new scenario at the moment, which has a different one again. But like that core one is a good structure. And a lot of it came, and then drilling down, how do you explain that? And so then it became like, how can we like, Yeah, things like idea plus idea equals novelty is one of those GM tips, and that's kind of the base, and then the GM rules, which are kind of obviously the GM rules are specifically me drawing from the principles empowered by the Apocalypse games. So, okay, how can I drill down and make this stuff really small and tight? So the one thing I want to give credit for is Zach, who is like the project lead of Die side now. It was their idea to call it rituals. In other words, they had a load of it. And they, by saying rituals, I mean, oh yeah, it is. This is what it is. The whole thing is a ritual. Like you start with this ritual, you pack in the dice, you ask these questions. That's the ritual. You end with a dice ritual, and then there's a series of rituals that build the story. But it's like, it's not like, it's a pre-gen, but there's so many big empty spaces to fill in. It's not really a pre-gen. You know what I mean? Like there's so much stuff that you have to plug in. Like it is just more of a sort of structure. It's like tell you what, it's like when I was writing Star Wars. I'm a weird, pretentious writer, as you may have noticed. But like when I was writing Star Wars is great. Star Wars is like playing the blues because you know how it goes. Like, and you immediately know, no, I don't do this like 6-8 time middle bit. It's the blues. It's got to feel like Star Wars. And if you do stuff that doesn't feel like Star Wars, it breaks. However, that's still very flexible. You're playing the blues. You can do lots of cool stuff over it, but the structure underlying it means it still basically feels like it feels. And that was Die. And that in the same way, Die's got this kind of like, it's not quite 12 bar blues. It's a bit more complicated, not more complicated. It's a bit messier than that, but the idea is there. So, I mean, also it comes from like Grant, who is the designer of RRD, or one of the two main designers at RRD anyway. And he basically wanted the first game of Die to be really good. And I know that states the obvious, but also most people only really ever play if somebody plays a lot of RPGs, you may only play the game once. So you want a really cool one, if you can only play it for like 3 or 4 sessions, you want it to be good. And that was it. That was the idea of let's take everything that's good about Die and stick it in one chapter. And basically, if you do this, we'll promise you a pretty good time. Like we think you've got the best chance for it. And that was the idea anyway. So yeah,
it works really well. I know. I hope some people steal this from you on that side and reference you guys on that, because I feel like more RPGs could have kind of like a good framework that still allows DMs to be creative, but have that support the beginning, the end. It really worked well for my taste. It worked well for my style. I'll say pre-gen, I get bored and I start doing my own thing, and I try to figure out how to marry that back into the pre-gen. But this, I could still do my own thing. Just have to know where it starts and ends and follow those frameworks.
It's interesting. There's a lot of PBTA games, which of course they have the sort of a really strong starting place, and then the rules expand out in all directions. You end up in Crazy Town, which is great. And actually, Girl Underground does something quite similar to Die. It has got a set ending because it's like an Alice in Wonderland game, and you've got these sort of set encounters, but they're not really. They're sort of more wobbly than that because you've changed your character so much. So like there's stuff like that is in a similar space. It's a really great. It's like a little zine of a game. And so the really cool thing about that is, like, you've got a lead character who's basically the girl having adventures and learning stuff about the world, but everyone also plays one of their friends, and these are big archetypal. I'm the big cowardly lion type character. I'm the Tin Man. You're not the Tin Man, but you're the person who can't do emotions. Yeah. And like playing those characters are able to just very big, strong actions. And the fact and it's really cool to play a supporting character because everyone knows the girl's in charge because it's the girl's story. And the one I played was like, you ever watch like Labyrinth, Ludo, the big sad, like, yeah, I would basically play the Ludo type of character. So I was a giant hobbit who was very hairy and also very sad because I got kicked out by my people because I was weird looking and enormous. And it was great to just sort of have those big emotions. I know what I meant to do. I meant to smash things by accident and be very sad about it and then just try to be brave, but also be scared. You know what I mean? That was really, anyway, I'm running off. Great game.
I'll have to check that one out. I have to put it on my list. I haven't played that one yet.
Cool.
So definitely with that, have you ever had a chance to play as not the game master in a Die game?
Not significantly. It's annoying, isn't it? Like you'd think I'd have done it by now. Like as I had a kid a year and a half ago, so since the game has been in a solid, like really solid state, I haven't had much free time. I would like to. I think. Obviously, not. I think I would. I would love to. And it's great because the Die rules are flexible enough. It's not even I would go, I think you're playing this wrong because it's not. The part of Die is you're meant to reinvent it. Like there's all the open questions are like, what does this mean? And the table decides. And not in I haven't made it up way in a way that no, I think questions and what the table decides are interesting. Yeah, I would love to. I mean, like my friend Mink, who is like one of the first play testers, she ran a short adventure with me being an emotion knight. Even and that very brief bit gave me something really interesting because the Emotion Knights, obviously they've got all the characters have quite a wide tool set, and you decide what you can do with them. And I was playing a Vigilance Knight. And it was one of those bits where I was just playing with, what's that? I can use this ability, Vigilance. That means my sword can sense people who are being vigilant. That basically means I can spot guards with my sword.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I never designed that as a GM. That's just emergent from the game. And so me being a player made me aggressively, discover things about the game. And that's kind of what you want. Because if I know all the answers, that's not interesting to me. Like, I mean, when I was a games journalist, I love games like Deus Ex and Thief and all that kind of emergent sim kind of game. Like, I like games where the designers don't know the solution.
Definitely. Like,
that's the point. The point for me, the game is the questions. And like, what things are people going to do with it? That's not question. I like all the games, but the games I love are them.
And I think that's one of the kind of the really great things I liked about Die is it had like a simple base, like with the core mechanics, but the classes like add like a whole like level of craziness onto it. Like between the dictators, the godbenders, like all of that, there's so much crazy stuff they can do that you really would never know what your player is going to cook up or try to push through on it.
Thank you. Like, yeah, that was so much. Like, I realized like what I wanted, you had to have that very core, simple system. Like like it had to be as really quite basic. So because everything else is going to be so unusual, so all the classes are so different. There's so many rules for the GM to remember. You have to make the core rules really simple. That was for me as in like the cognitive load is significant on a Die GM. So that, and also the idea of making all the classes so wild was that the other players don't really understand each other's class, which also makes them core magical. You know what I mean? So it's not does the Fool know how the Godbinder does stuff? Probably not. And that for me, that's kind of enchants it a little, you know what I mean? But yeah, that for me, like the core system had to be like, you one dice to roll and hit, they'll try to really drill down and like minimize. Yeah, very much intended.
Yeah, I think that worked really well. And I know you haven't got to play much, but what would be the class you'd want to play? What's kind of your favorite class?
I mean, I don't really have a. So the funny thing when I was developing is, since it was over a long period of time, and you mentioned earlier that half your players hadn't seen the comic. I was playtesting the game before anyone had read the comic. So like none of the players knew the game. And then you got to the point where some of them did, or some of them maybe read a script. That rolling thing is interesting. But also as you're developing, the classes were all out of whack. So like, oh yeah, this class is now much better than this other class because it was developed later. And then you had to basically kind of try to get them all on one level. And then the master was the last one to be developed, as in the player master. And that was really difficult because all the other classes were quite good. And then the master was rubbish. What would I like to play? I don't know, actually. Because like for me, I say this on the Discord all the time, persona gen is where Die's at. The classes are really cool. You get to do really cool stuff, but the persona is the game. You know what I mean? Like, who are these people? So like the classes for me are like, what would be the best class for this person I make up?
Yeah.
And, like if I'm playing someone who's like, I'm writing the story at the moment, and there's two real ways that it can work. And the persona, it's develop a persona, and then the class is them, but more so. So in the comic, Matt is powered by his depression. He's incredibly, or his sadness is what makes him powerful. But the other way to do it, so for example, dictators are really good for people who are control freaks in real life. So suddenly you're able to be a complete. You're tempted in a way which is awful. But the other way of doing it is somebody who has no control in their life, someone who's been put upon, and no one ever listens to them. Give them a voice and see what happens. You know what I mean? So like both of them are really cool dictators in completely different ways. I play the notion. Tell you what, the older I get, the more I play lawful good characters and not always don't really play D&D often, but characters who are basically epically really good, nice. Because the real world's horrible. I can try to be someone nice here, and maybe the world won't stomp on me. But like I could play I reckon I'd be a good Emotion Knight. I think I do interest because Emotion Knights wear their heart on their sleeve. They feel things passionately. They hit things. These are all the things I enjoy in game.
Emotion Knights are a really fun class. I said my favorite narratively. I loved what on the comic book the Dictator was like. I loved kind of the feel of that one. I don't know if I'd want to play that one though.
It's petrifying. That's the class I mostly. If I drop a class from the game, it's the Dictator because the Dictator automatically it's going to go hard. But yeah, I get that. It's petrifying.
You have some moral. You have some moral decisions if you play that class. Probably the one I play though, and this is I found after the more I GM, the more I get to play in other people's games. I go for like the one that's going to spring the trap, intentionally let the DM have some fun. The Fool is probably my favorite one to play, just because you get to go in bravado all out, play your class the way you're meant to, but they get the GM to have some fun by just having some craziness whatever you do.
It's like the Fool is like simple's the wrong word. I mean, Fool, it cuts to the chase. You know what I mean? Yeah. It does the job, and I would say, especially all the variety of Fools that people have had, because obviously in the comic, Chuck's a bit of a monster, but like player Fools aren't always that. I mean, like the longest die campaign I ever had was like big 435 episode proper campaign, but the Fool in that was a complete sweet. They were like just the sweet idiot, like Bertie Wooster, the British, like they were very sweet. Like guy from a private school and like fallen on hard times, but also just very heart on sleeve. And it, like, you know what I mean? And that's a different kind of Fool, which is a great energy. Tell you what, if I'm running like Godbinder would be fun. Actually, no, tell you what, I love GMing for Godbinders.
Yeah. Because
it's like I've got up to 12 NPCs to, you know, play with. And like there's a lot of fun, especially when the gods are always weird or increasingly weird as you go along. I had like the last campaign I ran had a God of War. And I just asked her, how do you imagine war? Yeah. And she said, I basically imagine like American presidents, like that as the persona did. And this was basically, so immediately became I forgot the monument. Oh my god, my brain, the Rushmore Monument, but like with like 50 presidents' heads on, like an enormous, like monstrous thing. The faces morphed in and out like Terminator 2, and it just spoke. And I did a very bad Nixon impression for that anytime I spoke as this god. You know what I mean? And like so that came completely from the player, and was immediately, oh no, that's it. And that gives me an idea how to role play a God of War quite differently to how you would normally play. You know what I mean? Because if you told me to a God of War off the top of my head, it'd be, you know, Ares or something. But like the idea, as you said earlier, like the structures, you know, okay, what does this person think war is like? And that's what I'm going to play. And that immediately makes it different. It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
I love the persona generation, kind of bringing the players to buy into the world building. And one of my favorite things is the world building, because usually my other campaigns are long running campaigns where like I can build the world. And I got to make sure the world is, I get over in my head about make sure the world flows a certain way. But with this one, like it's a hodgepodge. It's a D20 filled with different influences. I just get to have fun. Like, that sounds interesting. Let's throw it in and see how they deal with it.
Also, like the fact is, people, and then especially in the core die rituals game, it's like it's their teenage fantasy RPG world. Of course, it makes no sense. They had no idea. You know what I mean? Like even putting aside the fact it's like being warped by this alien god thing or whatever. It's, you know, oh yeah, it's got the Care Bears next to Warhammer 40k Space Marines. Of course, it does. Like, you know.
So we had Grand Admiral Thrawn hanging out with Xanatos from Gargoyles and Wolverine. So just a real hodgepodge of people that should probably never be in the same story, but they made sense of the story.
Yeah, because it's like it's what people love. You know what I mean? That's the thing about Die. It's like people's fantasies. So yeah, anything can be in there. I think the fairly early response I remember GMing was it was set at a music festival. This one, they got backstage and they met David Bowie. And like they basically all the players were that kind of music geek, so like they all and it's like yeah. Obviously, part of my brain was going, you're not really meeting David Bowie, you're meeting me, and I'm pretending. But like, you know, they had that moment of oh my god, it's David Bowie. Yeah.
One of the always fun to be able to kind of pull in those kind of fun Easter eggs for the crew, especially when you know what their interest is from the persona generation. Because a lot of my players put some of their real life interest in the persona generation, just so they can their favorite TV shows back in the day and things like that, so we could sample from. So it was just kind of fun having that in there.
It's fun. Like the part of Die is like whilst you're playing real world people and you're making them up, you'll always put a bit of yourself in there. And then it becomes like, what do you care about? And then you know what I mean? Because it makes it a slightly safe way to play with bits of yourself and what you, because it's always, especially never pick anything which you don't at least slightly like. Like, you know, if I picked, I don't know, let's say I didn't like Star Wars and I picked Star Wars as my love, it's not going to make the plot won't make any sense to me. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I love that aspect. One thing I wanted to ask you too. I know we've talked about the Fallen piece, but what's like your what's like the mechanic of Die like you're the most proud of, like the one that you kind of go back to time and time again?
Hey, I said the Fallen one is really clean. The end game is really clean. I mean, like it's not really. It's not really the ritual. Is like the dice passing. the passing out the dice, as in you are this, like, and then the close your eyes and put the dice. The going to die ritual always works. Like in terms of like, because it's obviously it's a bit silly. Like you're asking players to do something, but like it's buy-in. Like we're going to do this. We're going to close our eyes and like something. What's going to happen? I don't know. My eyes are shut, and that's what I mean. That's a bit Spire. This also is a mechanic, but a structural bit that always works is the transformation when they pick up dice. Yeah. Like players never like. You get your magical girl moment, and all like players will never get bored of describing what they look like when they transform, and it's amazing because it's like it's the fantasy. A really basic mechanic I like is the Neo, and I was going to mention this because with Neo, the core mechanic for Neo is that they're powered by fair gold, and they find the fair gold, it disappears every day. And that's a good mechanic. It drives, I'm out of gold, or I would like gold. I've got, that's a basic thing that works well. And also an economy, like, or shall I activate stuff, or shall I save the gold to ultimately power up? What should I spend the gold on? All those, that's all kind of fun game designy stuff. But the stuff that's fun is in terms of the moment you know what sort of Neo, because there's basically two sorts of Neo players. You get out the first piece of gold, and you do something like, what's the thing you most ever wanted in the world? And the player, the persona will say, I don't know, when I first saw the person I was falling in love with, or something like that, and you say something like, looking at this coin makes you feel exactly like that, or more so than that. And then they do one or two things, one of which is, I'm going to stay away from that, and the other one is grab it as quickly as possible. Literally, because I'm normally holding a coin across the table if I'm not playing online, just grab it. And some people just don't even wait for the coin, me to say anything. They just want the coin. That, they're kind of like, do you want a coin? Yes, I want a coin. Yeah, that might be my favorite. Like, because I think what we're just talking about is how all sorts of mechanics. Because part of me really likes bits of the math of various stuff. Which I like. But sometimes those moments, like rules that make moments, that's what I love about game design. And if that's why Zach was so smart to say rituals, because so much is, what is rule, what is ritual, that's quite interesting, I think.
Definitely. It's always nice when the mechanics kind of come and get out of the way of the story enough, but support the story enough to make those moments. Because sometimes the mechanics can be too much or too little, where they won't really get you there. But yeah, it's always nice when they come together at that right moment to hit the emotional level you're going for.
I hope it's definitely that kind of when it clicked. I tell you what, like the Persona Gen. This is actually this was quite hard to do. Like Persona Gen originally was completely freeform. So the way it was, there was no like set questions. It was just you start talking, you make up a group of people, and of course I'm running the game. And in fact, I think, and there were various scenarios that had something a bit like Persona Gen in, but the core game was always you sit down and make something up. And Mina and RRD, no, for God's sake, Kieron, you know what you should be doing. Like, I took a set of basic, and he's, like I was thinking, okay, I really need to do that, and I was putting off forever, and it works. But there's a bit with the rituals when it was the big question in rituals where you basically give to everyone like one question and everyone the second half of the question, and it's always basically, what did you want? Why didn't you get it? And that's the and that's like, and that's how you make someone messed up.
Exactly.
But the best of all those questions is there's one question which is like, there's something you really wanted, what was it? And that happened. The question is in it twice. Mm-hmm. And the second half is the first one is that thing you wanted, you didn't get it. Why? And the second half of the second question is that thing you wanted, you got it. It didn't make you happy. Why? You know what I mean? And those two questions together are the pure sad die energy right there.
Definitely, and I feel like it's just kind of a good way, because initially we were going to try to do it by Discord, the Persona generation, just like because do it over text, everybody's busy. But luckily, your server, the Discord server for Die RPG, I was mentioning that, like whether should we do it over text or not. But yeah, a lot of people chimed in and said do it over video. I say in person, but we were all over video. But it gives like a real good energy with people riffing off of each other, kind of coming like somebody will answer something and somebody else will come up with something for their own PC or the group. And I think that just really some good energy to get the game started.
It's definitely one of the key bits of Persona Gen is anyone can ask questions at any time. It's not like the set, you know what I mean? Because it's like, obviously session zeros are great and people can come, and games where you come to the table with a character are also great. But Die is so much about, it's not just making a person, it's making a social group. And it's got to, and like seeing it, building it together, it's like it's jamming. I'm going music metaphor again, but there's a real energy to like, I would have never thought of that if you hadn't just said that. And the less you come to the table, not quite true. but coming to the table open to go any direction is really powerful. And it's camaraderie, because like, yeah, again, I describe RPG tables as bands. You get in the band together. Like, what do we play? And I discover what you seem, what you think's interesting by the choice you made. And when the table goes, you know what I mean? Like when a question comes out, it's like, why are you really sad? And everyone goes, oh, and then you say the answer and you go, oh, everyone's bought in, because caring about everyone else's characters is such a big part of the game. Because it's like, the more you can, like, there's a line in a lot of PBTA principles to GM is be a fan of the player's characters. It doesn't mean like, it means treat them badly, but it really means like love them. And I think that's a really good rule for players, because like if you're excited about everything else at the table, the game's better for everybody, because everyone loves being appreciated. And if you're enjoying listening to people, it's better for you too. And I think Persona Gen as that shared thing is 100% the buy. That's the buy-in. That's the we're the Fellowship of the Ring. Let's do this thing. Yeah,
I think it's for anybody who hasn't played it. I think it's crucial. Do it live. I'm glad because initially we were just going to do a Discord, so I'm glad that your server advises to throw through it live and make sure you're going to get that energy, get that buy-in from the players for each other. So.
It is part of the thing about rituals, in that like if your player's written, it's structured so you can do Persona Gen and then do the first bit going into die, and then there's a cliffhanger. So basically, let's say it's a 2 to 3 hour session. Persona Gen, between an hour and a half, occasionally 2 hours, depending on the players, and then maybe like half an hour of like character generation, and then about an hour in the world. And it's a pretty good first session. You know what I mean? Persona Gen can go much longer. Trust me, I've heard players go like 4 hours because they just love yapping, which is good. Yeah, it's a good kind of. It's the sort of design to. Also as a GM, for me, I don't want people to get much further than the cliffhanger, because that's where the GM has to starts doing some work.
So we did Persona Generation as our own session, and then did session 1 on that. But yeah, we had a hard stop at an hour and a half.
That's good.
Had to do something, but we probably could have went 2 hours without that hard stop, because there's still a few questions we had to do afterwards. But I think that was a great way to kind of get into it. One thing, I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and ask, outside of like the die RPG, like what TTRPGs do you play? Or what was your first TTRPG, and what do you play now?
I'm crazy old. It must be stressed. So like my first RPG was in 1985. I was like 10, and my mum and dad bought me the Middle-earth role-playing game from ICE. Now, MERPS is basically a cut-down Rollmaster. And if you know Rollmaster is ludicrous. It's like 100 pages of individual. Like, do you know like what a Rollmaster attack table is? They've got like 80 pages of weapons, each weapon on a different page, each with 20 columns and like 100 entries down the side.
Oh wow!
And then you roll, and then you get you get number of hits points damage, then the number of criticals you do, possibly 2, and those 2 criticals go to 2 different tables. Now, Middle-earth isn't that complicated, but it's getting there. And I'm 10. Me and my brother looked at it like, and my brother's like 8 at the time. We have no idea what this is on about. So we just cut out the figures and push them around. And across the next few years, we eventually learned more and more of MERPs. And we played I played like Red Box, be it D&D and BIT. And the big game I played as a teenager was probably Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. We played a lot of that. And Cyberpunk, both first one in 2020, Paranoia. Like they were kind of our big teenage games. Oh, GURPS. I played a lot of GURPS. Late, and like when it was university, I sort of drifted out as I went to university, but I still played a couple of things. Like I played Feng Shui. Actually, I lived in America for a year, and then I had a year no social group except for some role players. So I went hard into RPGs then. So I played like Feng Shui was the big one I played a lot of, I think, and I took that back. Played Amber.
That game. I just bought Feng Shui 2. I've got it on my shelf. It's been one of the main ones I've been meaning to check out.
it's good. Like I wouldn't say it like it's really good. It's like it does what it does really well, and especially at the time, like Hong Kong action cinema was new. Like I'd only just seen The Killer, which trust me, that was like top of my head being taken off. And it's a little slow now. Like it's a little more rules heavy than I would play now. But at the time, it was like nothing else, because it okay, I'm simplifying the rules, so Feng Shui heads will correct me. But it was the basic idea. One of the basic ideas was you kind of judge difficulty upon what it achieves, not what it looks like. Okay. So in other words, so me shooting someone with a gun would be as difficult as me jumping up that wall, running along the wall, behind them, smashing a goldfish ball on their head, and so they fall to the floor unconscious. Doesn't matter which way. Either way, they've ended up on the floor unconscious. Just that, you know, this way allows you to act more like a John Woo movie. You know, so like, that was really, really well. And tell you, it's a beautifully written manual. I love Robin D. Laws's work. It's a beautifully written manual. It's very. I can still quote bits of the manual now. The gun descriptions are some of genuinely the funniest thing because they describe the guns narratively speaking. You know, and whilst they've got a lot of guns, they're basically all the same because in this, you know, in those movies, it's not like someone with an assault rifle is better than John Woo, the lead character with a pistol. It's more like more stuff explodes nearby. But yeah, it's a really strong, and it's a ludicrous concept. Like it's a time traveling, like you can go like 56 AD, like 19th century, modern day cyberpunk future, like bizarre. And attack monkeys, which are like cybernetic attack monkeys. There's something called Battle Chimp Potemkin, which is like, what? Robin, what's wrong with you, mate? But yeah, I loved it. Yeah, anyway, I've got that.
I have to play that one because it's been on our list. We saw Cobra Kai, the TV show. Like we want like a crazy martial arts game. It's like I saw the list is good for martial arts games, so it's been on my list to play for the last few months.
Tell you what, I played a Cobra like one. I'll fast forward for the rest. Didn't play many RPGs in the noughties. Got back into RPGs around 2013 with Monster Hearts. Actually, I was playing a different Warhammer game by then as well. But like Monster Hearts was my way into indie, my way hard into indie RPGs. And across the last like period of like heading towards die, I played a lot. Like I played a lot of games. Last year and a half, I haven't played much. Last game I ran as a campaign was Trophy Gold. I ran like 12 episodes of that, which is beautiful. Really cut to the bone, fascinating horror adventure RPG, and exactly what I wanted to play. And Hollows from ORD, I ran that this year as well. There was a question, I've gone past it, and it was Cobra Kai.
Oh, yeah.
I was playing on the Gauntlet, and someone ran a Cobra Kai game using Hearts of Rulin. Hearts of Rulin is a great Powered by the Apocalypse martial art. Obviously, it's mainly about wushu like dramas, but it's got a load of really great rules that work for Cobra Kai because it's all about family and duty and martial art. So a couple of my favorite rules for them are one is basically you got characters that are mainly defined by status, not the right word, it's scale. And basically, if you're doing a combat with anyone lower level than you, you will always win. Okay. If you're doing a high level than you, you always lose. And the role is basically how badly you lose or win, or what it looks like, or like because if you. And then, like, you've got to be beaten by someone better than you, so then you can go away to have a training montage to become their scale. So it's like it's the structure of those moves. You've got to lose to be able to beat them after learning how to beat them. And they're great. There's another rule called internal. It's an internal monologue move. So anytime you're feeling distraught, you basically internal monologue to yourself, and then you sort of roll to see whether the audience root for you or not. No, that's not. That's something else. I'm mixing up that separate game, which is Passiones del Passions, which is a telenovela RPG, which is also amazing.
Well, I have to check that one out because we were watching Cobra Kai and we were talking about my Star Wars table. And we were just like riffing about like a martial arts game. So we have to add Hearts of Wulong. That's how we find Feng Shui. Because we love the show, so we want to do something with that.
Yeah. But Feng Shui is basically all about the action. It's basically Feng Shui adventures are basically action scenes with a tiny bit of plot between and a dramatic action scene. So and it works really well. Well, it was Hearts of Wulong is all about the emotional drama. It's all about Like, I tell you, when you fight against the duels against another player character, the way that works is you basically pick, as in, you can win, but I want this. And it basically, it's one of these things where all duels between you are negotiated. So you'll win, but like you're going to hit me too bad, and the person you love is going to be offended by you. That kind of. So like, it's always about that, as in you win, but. Which is a great always drama.
Buy it and kind of give like the players get to kind of set the stage. Like sometimes leaving up to the dice is fun, but sometimes too for those narrative pieces, especially when it's player versus player, it's nice to let them have that little kind of buy-in and bit of negotiation ability to set the stage for it.
It's fun. Anyway, I ramble. I could talk about games. There's nothing better than an RPG scene at the moment. I want to talk about like Brindlewood Bay, If You'd Left Me Alone, which is a great. It's Cthulhu. It's Murder She Wrote meets Lovecraft. So it's basically a group of old ladies that researching murders that becomes more culty. But it's got this amazing mechanic. There's no set solution to any adventure. So basically, you gather clues, your group theorizes, then you roll to see whether it's true or not.
Oh, nice.
And then and if you roll like high, it's true. If you roll low, it's not true. If you roll in the middle, it's true, but something's wrong. So it's, and then that feels, as I love detective games, but that feels utterly sacrilegious. I love how, what I mean? Like, oh, there's no objective truth. This is all about but you puzzling, you go, okay, we've got this shoe. We found this shoe, and we heard this person talking about like attack monkeys. Like, what could possibly? I got the, and you build it, and then you roll, and then suddenly and this, you're talking about somebody who you have trouble with running set adventures. These adventures are all kind of like deconstructed menus. Like, they give you lots of cool stuff to use, but they don't say how it's connected. And the games like Brindlewood Bay or Trophy do that really well. So a game you might like, Apocalypse Keys, which is like a Hellboy game, basically. Yeah. Like, you all play Hellboy type creatures, and you solve mysteries and have big emotions. And I wrote an adventure for them, and that's also a deconstructed adventure mode. And for me, I found that, because I don't really run set adventures, but I found running adventures like this, where here's some cool stuff to use, really useful. Like, here's some cool ingredients, but you still riff. That's good stuff. Anyway.
That's the way I've got that one on my shelf too. Apocalypse Keys. I just picked that one up recently. Haven't looked at it yet though, but it's on my shelf to play.
It's done.
So I'm going to check that one out.
I wrote a stretch goal for it, actually, which they haven't released it yet, but I wrote an adventure for them. So like, when they release it, download and knows. I'm happy with it. It's cute.
Nice. Well, one of the last big things I ask you, what's next for either the Die RPG or the Die Comics? Is there anything coming up for that, or anything you can share on that side?
Strictly speaking, nothing's been announced yet, but like, we're at work. Like, I've mentioned that I'm working on an adventure, which implies we're doing some adventures in. I think we'll be announcing quite shortly. Like, in fact, probably even by the time we put it online. But Steffi's drawing a cover at the moment for something. But like, there's a bit like, what do we think is useful? Because there's so much cool stuff in Die RPG as the manual. Like, if we never did anything again, there's so much stuff in there. But like, I'm sort of thinking, okay, what else can I show to get people's brain working? Like, oh, you can do it like this. And that's kind of what I'm writing this event. This is I think it's the best adventure the best standalone adventure I've written for Die, because it's a little bit tighter, but it's still very flexible. So I'll see how that works. Actually, I've mentioned what it's about. It's in the form of a hex crawl, but it's not really a hex crawl. It's basically a group of people who are obsessed over a previous lover, and they've never got over it, and they're just whining in the pub all the time. And the GM basically goes, please, can we stop whining about everybody's partners, ex-partners? Let's play a game instead. And then the adventure goes from there. It's called Bizarre Love Triangles, and it's an X crawl, being the joke. So yeah, I think it's good. Hopefully people like it. And then hopefully, and also the other thing about Die is that we got to so much of this work was we're getting to a point where other people can write it as well. Like, people can do their own Die stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing what everyone else writes about in it eventually. And me and Stephanie are working on something else at the moment, but we haven't ruled out Die, and I think it's fairly likely we'll come back one day.
Definitely. And I love the comic. And also, I forgot to mention this earlier, shout out to Stephanie too. I love the art that you guys did with this one too. Like, it just really fit for both the core rulebook and the comic itself, just fit really well with kind of the mood of the comic in the series.
Like, Stephanie's such an amazing emotional artist. Like, she's kind of like I've known her for years, and we were talking about doing a book forever. And it was basically when I had the idea for Die, it was like, oh no, this is the Stephanie book, because she's this big poetic emotional artist. You know what I mean? Like, so I mean, every page looks. I mean, if you're going to lose yourself in a fantasy world, it would look a bit like Stephanie. Like, it's really good stuff.
I loved it. Yeah, major shout out on that side.
Oh, I'll pass that on.
Sweet. Well, definitely before we go, anything else you want to kind of shout out before we wrap up today?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. It's been like lovely talking. It's so great to sort of see the game out there and people playing it. So it's like the Discord's really great. As you said, it's a really friendly. People are very supportive. And the best thing is I've said most of the answers now, so people will say the answers for me, which is great. So I don't need to actually say it off. Actually, I'm lying. Anyone on the Discord will see that I will regularly just write an essay randomly because I can't help myself. But it's fun. Like, as I said earlier on, like, the incredible power of seeing people taking a sort of structure you've made and going for it is great, honestly. And I really hope people enjoy it. And I look forward to seeing people at Gen Con, hopefully.
Definitely looking forward to seeing the game at Gen Con. Definitely, if you guys haven't seen either my actual play, but definitely check out one of Kieran's. If you're a comic book fan, he had one with himself, Brubaker, and Fraction. It was amazing. It was just I don't think it was Kieran and Friends as a tagline, and I opened up. Is that Matt Frack? That's Brubaker too. And I was just saying it was pretty soap.
Yeah.
So it was exciting for me as a comic book fan to see that. It was a fun adventure too. It was a one shot too, so it was kind of a cool way to get a good feel of Die.
It's the truest stuff that adventure is. It was about basically everyone in the book is pretending to be comic creators who had their invention ripped off, although their comic event ripped off, and like we're making jokes, but that stuff is as real as it gets.
It was like I was dying the whole time. It was definitely a fun adventure. That was the first, that was actually the first actual play for the system that I watched before I got started. So that was just a cool surprise on that side. So definitely everybody go check that out if you haven't. But yeah, definitely if you haven't, check out the Die RPG. It's amazing. Bring the comic book. If you're going to be the game master, read the comic too. It'll give you a ton of ideas and have some fun running it. But Kieron, really thank you for coming on the show and being the first guest on Meet the Maker with kind of being the two tabletop RPG creators. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an honor, and looking forward to see who I have on next.
Definitely. Well, thank you everybody, and until next time, folks.